Hello, everyone, and welcome to our breakout session, The Digital Difference for Patient Care. My name's Jennifer Royer. I work in our product marketing group here at DocuSign, and we really love these sessions just to hear all the great stories of what our customers are doing. We have two organizations presenting today. The first is a laboratory services organization. So we have Adam Rosenfeld, who I'll introduce shortly, and then we'll take a couple of questions while it's fresh in your mind, and then we'll move to Cedars-Sinai, the ladies of Cedars-Sinai, who I will introduce after we cover Adam's presentation. So let me welcome Adam Rosenfeld. He will be talking to you about some of the cool things his organization is doing. He is relentlessly focused on process improvement and taking paper out of the organization. They've integrated with Salesforce, so really using multiple technologies to make this happen. And Adam is a Six Sigma Master Black Belt. So yeah, he is all about this stuff. So without further ado, let me welcome Adam. Let's give him a round of applause.
I think I got this one. So. Thank you so much. So for those of you who don't know Six Sigma, never heard of Six Sigma, I'm basically a glorified project manager. I'm a project manager that uses statistical processes, statistical analysis to measure process capability, stability, and it's my job to make things better when you don't know how to improve them. So I was recently promoted, and I met with my new boss, the vice president of our division, and he said to me, go out there and improve our processes. That was all the direction I got, was just make it better. So with that much openness, I was like, okay, well, where should I start? What should I do? I want something that can impact multiple people and multiple departments. And of course, because I'm at the DocuSign momentum, you probably know what I found. I found DocuSign, and I was like, this is great, but I need to show the business that I can make this work, that I can do something with this. So my first idea was to start small. I needed a win, I needed a quick win, so I started with our internal sales team. It's a small team of about 15 people, but they generate hundreds of contracts every single month. So I took 5 of these people, and I taught them how to use DocuSign. Well, first, I had to learn how to use DocuSign myself. I didn't have a developer. I didn't have any IT resources. I was on my own in this effort. So I learned how to use it, and I taught 5 people how to use it. I spoke to those salespeople, and it turns out they mostly use 3 contracts. 90% of what they send out, there's 3 documents. So we created templates for those documents, and we worked really hard on these templates to make sure that they were as perfect as they could be. And then we measured it. We ran a pilot. So we looked at the group that was using our old process, the old process of emailing an attachment, asking our clients to print it out, sign it, and scan it or fax it back to us, which is horribly annoying to put that burden onto our clients. So we had one group doing the old process and the new pilot team using DocuSign. We ran that for 30 days, and then we looked at the results. Well, as you can imagine, DocuSign was amazing. For our initial measurement from sending out the contract to it coming back to us was an average of 5 business days. With DocuSign, we reduced that to 1 business day. And it's so interesting. I heard that so many times in other people's presentations that 84% of documents are returned within 1 day. And we saw that as well. We also measured how many phone calls we received with questions about contracts. The number 1 question, where do I sign? We got an average of 7 phone calls per day with people asking about contract questions. The DocuSign team reduced that to 1. And then we measured something we'd never measured before, which is after we receive the contract back, how many times do we have to reach out to these clients and find out further information, or they did sign in the wrong location, they didn't put a date on the contract. And 75% of the paper documents we received back, we had to reach out to the client and have a follow-up question. With DocuSign and with our templates, that problem completely disappeared. So it was an amazing success. When you have something that successful, well, obviously you move forward and you roll it out. So now we had the challenge of adding 10 more users to this. It was very easy to manage with a small pilot team. And our templates were the key to our success. So we literally took those templates and renamed them master underscore and the contract name. We gave everyone on the internal sales rep team access to DocuSign, and we told them to go out, grab the master template, save it to their DocuSign folder, and rename it the contract name underscore their name, and make it their own. Add a subject, add the message, set up the reminders. And we decided as a group that all contracts would expire in 6 months. And then go to work, and they loved it. We talked about love in the general session if you were there, and I'm like, you're stealing my thunder, people, because this internal sales team loved it. And you know who else started to love DocuSign? The director of the sales group, the guy who had to sign the hundreds of contracts that this one team was producing, because this is what he looked like before we moved to DocuSign. He was drowning in paper. So here he is, he's an executive director of sales, and he has to sit at his desk every week and review price and sign contracts, review price and sign contracts. And at that level, you travel all the time. And to come back with piles of paper on your desk that you have to go through, it's not value added time. So he approached me and said, well, how can I use DocuSign? How can I make my time more efficient? And of course, the perfect solution, which they talked about at the general session, is the smartphone app. So we loaded the app on his smartphone. I taught him how to use it. And then once you know, a week later, he sends me this picture. I'm on the beach. I'm signing DocuSign. This is the best thing in the world. So no longer was signing documents a chore. It was something that he could do when he wanted to do it, whether he was waiting for a plane, at the beach, at the pool, review the price, sign the document. If it's not good, he can reject it. And this was great. This was huge, because now he was an advocate. He was talking to other people about DocuSign and be like, you got to talk to Adam. This DocuSign thing is amazing, and we need to roll it out further. So where should we go next? Well, we wanted to stay customer focused, but we also wanted to look at other processes that impact our customers indirectly. We looked at our collection sites. We have collection sites across the United States, and we have international collection sites. And they're collecting blood and urine and all that really fun stuff, all these great liquids that we turn into revenue. So I was talking to the manager of the international collection team, and they had an interesting problem that they thought DocuSign could help out with. So picture a small group located in America talking to international collection sites. And they have to capture the mailing address, the billing address, and all sorts of information and put that into Salesforce. Now what was happening is it's basically a spelling mistake, or the information was lost in translation. We were getting bad address information in our system because of communication issues between the two countries. So how can DocuSign solve this? Well, I recommended that we link DocuSign to Salesforce. There is an app in the Salesforce store that allows you to do this very easily. And then you use something called a merged field. The merged field takes the information from Salesforce and puts it in your DocuSign agreement. So that's what we did. We took all the address fields, all the information in Salesforce, and put it into the document via DocuSign and sent that to our international collection managers. They were able to view the information and correct it. They could correct all that address information we had messed up. And then when the document came back signed, all that information would flow into our Salesforce and update it and make it correct. So the problem and issue of sending a patient to the wrong address, that's horrendous. Imagine how upset that person would be looking for a place that is wrong. That problem is gone. We solved it with DocuSign. So what happens when you have two use cases with DocuSign that show a lot of success? Well, this is what happens. If you want to make friends and influence people, be the person who creates DocuSign accounts. Because the next thing I know, I have every manager and department head calling me up, stopping by and visiting, and saying, when is my department going to get DocuSign? I guess at this point, we really had momentum. So we had to pick who's going to be next. And we decided to get back to the customer, be more customer focused. But this time, we were looking at the regional salespeople and our national sales team. Now, they are not adding new clients. These are big clients. They're sending out amendments. They're changing their test panel. And this was a manual process controlled via email, which means there is no control. So we gave them DocuSign accounts. And again, we went back to the templates. How can we use templates to fix this problem? Again, I don't have a developer. I don't have any IT resources. I'm doing this on my own. So I decided to create templates for every single major client. That way, in the workflow, we could add the signing authority and everyone else in that company who needed a copy, who needed to know your test menu had changed. And we also added everyone in our company that had to know their test menu had changed. And now we set up one document and the workflow takes care of the rest. And then we can also track it and follow it in DocuSign to make sure that everyone is getting that information. Everyone knows a change is occurring and you need to react and take action. So now the entire sales organization has DocuSign. So I'm thinking about, well, I need to show that we can improve our internal processes that aren't as collection site focused, that aren't client patient focused. So I want to prove this. So I look at the credit process. Now, our company, like a lot of companies out there, we make mistakes, and sometimes we overcharge for a service. And we want to correct that problem as fast as possible. And the process we used to follow is the salesperson would pull up a Word document, they would type in the client information and the credit amount, and they would send that out to their manager. And the manager would look at it, maybe open the attachment, maybe they didn't, type the word approve, send it back to them, they'd send it to the billing department, and they would issue a credit. That's a really bad process. I mean, email is not the way to control a workflow. Email gets lost in the sauce. So again, I turned to DocuSign, and I created a template with a built-in workflow, except it started with the salesperson sending a document to themselves. They would send the document to themselves, enter the client information, enter the amount to be credited. When they would complete that, it would go to their manager. We now made the manager initial the amount being credited, therefore getting visualization that they were looking at the dollar amounts. Because before, we thought they were just kind of rubber stamping it and sending it off. Initial the amount, sign the document, and now it goes automatically to our billing department. This solves so many problems. We can track it through the workflow, we can set up auto reminders, and we have a great document for our compliance team. The compliance people, when they go to audit us, will see our records are beautiful. And hopefully, we'll use DocuSign more to make other departments as equally functional. So where do we go from here? Where do we take DocuSign? Well, we're continuing to use Salesforce more and more, and we're going to be using DocuSign and Salesforce together. It was just said in the general session, and I can't agree more. If you have Salesforce, you have to hook it up to DocuSign. The two are incredibly powerful, and merged fields are awesome. We're going to expand to further departments, more and more use cases. And like Microsoft said in the general session, we want everyone to have a DocuSign account, because there's no better way to learn how to use DocuSign and think about how can I improve my processes than to have a DocuSign account. Because I've led this charge, I'm continuing to meet with other people in my organization, and I tried to just get through one clear message to them. And this is the message you should take to everyone in your organization as well. And that is, if you have an email address and you need a signature, use DocuSign. Thanks for your time. Are there any questions? There's a question way in the back. You, yes.
What's next on the plan?
Well, we're continuing to look at Salesforce, really. Unfortunately, not everyone in our organization uses Salesforce, so we're going to have DocuSign follow Salesforce. We're also looking, I talked about our international collection sites. We're going to start looking at our collection sites in the United States. Why aren't we using DocuSign for that process? The international team had that one problem that we had to address urgently, But we're going to start looking at the sites in the United States as well and bring them up. So, in the labs, we're not looking at that quite yet. We currently have a chain of custody process that we follow, so we really don't see that as of yet. I think our lab people are very protective of their systems. So actually, I was talking to one of the vendors in the pavilion about that yesterday. So, any other questions? Great.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adam. So next we have Momentum Veterans from Cedars-Sinai. We were talking before this session and decided that Jenny and Dr. Reimel deserve honorary Six Sigma Master Black Belts for all of the great work that they've done with DocuSign over the years. So this is the third time they're presenting at Momentum, and each year they come back and deliver something bigger and better. And so what I'm really excited about is that you'll hear from Jenny about a lot of the process improvement they've done in signing more women up to cancer research. This is very important work that they're doing here. They've actually won awards for it, so I'm allowed to brag about them. They're very humble themselves. And Dr. Reimel will be speaking to you about some research that they've done on digital versus paper. So they're not only doing life-saving research on cancer treatments, they're actually researching the process itself to make sure that the digital adoption is working to suit their needs, which I think is really remarkable. So with that, let me hand it over to Jenny Lester.
So we are thrilled to be back here for the third year in a row, and we're also so happy that DocuSign has made such a big impact on what we do every day, and then our success has been able to be expanded to a lot of other programs. So our whole idea is to work smarter, not harder. We have technologies that will improve our life and help us achieve the balance that we all want and achieve the goals that we have at work. So just a little background on Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. It's a hospital that was founded in 1902. We're a very large nonprofit hospital located on the edge of Beverly Hills and West Hollywood. We have over 2,000 physicians, over 10,000 employees. I think actually we're up to about 12,000 employees right now. Many are very dedicated in research. We actually have our own PhD program in translational medicine at Cedars, which a lot of people don't know. We are in a highly saturated medical environment where we have UCLA, USC, City of Hope, and Cedars-Sinai in one area. Our patients tend to be very, very intelligent and research so much on the internet, so very internet savvy. And we also rely on lots of volunteers. This is a picture of some of the people in our women's cancer program team. You'll see blue circles. That's Dr. Reimel in the back, me in the front. The Women's Cancer Program has focused on gender-specific cancers, mostly gynecologic oncology, ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, breast cancer research, things like that. For the Women's Cancer Program, we have many available trials. We have clinical therapeutic trials. These are trials where we're testing chemotherapy drugs on patients who have a diagnosis of cancer. We also do a lot of early detection and screening studies, particularly in the area of hereditary cancers, genetic mutations. You probably have heard of BRCA1 and 2. A lot of information about that has been in the news. We've been doing studies on hereditary cancer since before we knew about genetic mutations. And we also have a lot of laboratory-based studies where we collect tissue and specimen from patients and then use them in research for years and years to come. We were having problems with consenting patients. Specifically, when we started, we had a research for her registry, and it was a registry to engage all women, women with cancer, women without cancer, into research. It was basically a registry to say, hey, I'm interested in research, I want to participate, and we were having a really difficult time getting people. We had a limited reach. At the time, we could only consent the patients that were coming into the cancer center. So we weren't really going outside of the cancer center. We weren't having a lot of success in mammography clinics, in regular OBGYN offices. We also had time constraints. The pace of clinic is very quick. And to be able to weave in and out of clinic rooms at the time patients are being seen is really difficult. We also had undue burdens on staff, where if a patient was consented, they still had to make a copy of the consent, send a copy of the consent to the patient, send a copy of the consent to medical records, to make sure that questionnaires were done in paper. And really, it turned out to be a stack of papers this big. And then the administrative tasks would take way too long. So this conference has talked a lot about disruption. And one of the biggest disruptions in the field of research in women's cancer in this last year has been, or last couple of years, has been the Angelina Jolie effect. Is anybody aware of People magazine, the New York Times op-ed piece, where she came out and talked about her high risk of cancer due to a BRCA mutation and her choice to have prophylactic mastectomies to reduce her risk of breast cancer? Pretty soon after, she also had her ovaries and fallopian tubes removed to reduce her risk of ovarian cancer. She's a very influential woman, and it immediately resulted in a 40% increase in people having genetic testing, which is amazing. It's a ton of people who are knowing their status, being able to make decisions to reduce their risk of cancer, to be empowered to really know how to move forward. And this impact was also across all ethnicities, you can see in the second graph, and all ages. So it was a profound effect on one of the main things that we study, hereditary cancer. But what has made the largest impact? What has been the biggest disruptor in our field? Could it be DocuSign, or would it be Angelina Jolie? The answer for us is DocuSign. Although we really appreciate Angelina Jolie, so. What we did was I first talked about our research for her registry. When we adopted DocuSign as a way to consent patients, instead of just consenting patients in a clinic, we were able to do web-based advertising. And with web-based advertising, we could link people to a consent. They could read through the consent. They could attest to certain important things, for example, above the age of 18, that they understand all of the pieces of the consent, and they could consent at home. By doing this, we increased accrual 4.3 times. Dr. Reimel and I published a paper on this in Gynecologic Oncology. So we were able to really show in a peer-reviewed environment that digital consenting could increase accrual. Because of our success, we decided to do this with our biorepository, which is a tissue bank where people who are having surgery can donate tissue for research purposes. When we implemented in the biorepository, and I'll go through the different workflows, again, an immediate increase in the number of patients consenting and an immediate reduction in staff time, leaving clinical research staff to actually work on clinical research and not on administrative tasks. We have another study called the Cognitive Function Study, and instead of just being able to consent people at Cedars-Sinai, we are able to consent people nationally. Today I got an email from somebody in the UK. They want to consent patients to the study in the UK and give us data, which is very nice. Make more blue dots on the big map. For the Gilda-Radner Hereditary Cancer Program, I'm going to talk a lot more about this one. This one has enabled the consenter to talk to family members of our patients. So we're consenting people who live in New Jersey, in Florida, all over. And usually our patients are the ones that help us get their family members involved. So it's really wonderful. And accrual has increased from 9 people per month to at least 40 per month. So our workflows are different, and I think that this was really important for us to realize up front. Every study is different, every study has a different population, and one workflow is not going to work the same for everybody. So for the research for her, it's online awareness. They read about it, they may read a blog. Dr. Reimel has a blog. They may read a blog, they may read something, and then they're able to go to the website, learn more, initiate consent from the website, verify who they are, review the consent, and sign the consent online. The biorepository workflow is a little different, and we worked very closely with our institutional review board, who is the group at our hospital who's in charge of all of our research to make sure that we are protecting human subjects and we're doing the right thing. So with the biorepository, we switched things. It used to be the only way that we can consent patients is when the investigator was in the exact same room as the patient. Even if a conversation had happened before, the investigator had to be next to the patient when the patient signed consent. So we flipped it around a little bit. We were able to initiate a process where the investigator talks to the patient, verifies that the patient understands, I think it's 11 major things, goes through a checklist that's embedded into our DocuSign consent, the investigator signs off, and then the patient can either choose to sign right there, or the patient can choose to sign at home, or on the day of surgery. It gives the patient more time to talk to their family, their friends, everybody that they need to decide if they really want to participate. For this, most of our people sign at home, or they sign on the day of surgery. But at least we can document that we talked to them before the day of surgery, before they're dehydrated and nervous, and that they've had time to think about it. Cognitive function, we did more of a traditional approach where they become aware of the study either through a physician or through other advertising we might do. We do an initial interview. The participant signs first, and the investigator signs. For the Gilda Radner program, it's a lot like the biorepository where we do that investigator checklist, and then the patients sign in clinic via the app or at home using the desktop or mobile. So most of our people sign in clinic via the app, and this is coordinators running around with iPads, and patients sign right there in clinic. It's actually a very easy study. A lot of people want to participate, and it's gone very well. So by each study, the proportion of our digital consents to date, research for her is 100% digital. This is just the last 6 months of data. The biorepository is 50-50. The cognitive function is almost 100% digital. And our Gilda Radner program, you'll see here it's 83% digital in the last 6 months. But if we break it down and we look at September through February, you'll see how we ramped up and how it's now 100% digital consenting. Again, most of this is in clinic on an iPad assisted by the coordinator. The rest is the family members that we get to sign at home digitally as well. Interestingly, with the Gilda Radner program, we also created a system so that all of our questionnaires are also digital, and we adopted that at the same exact time as digital consent. So I'm really excited to work with DocuSign on our environmental impact on this one, because I think we'll have saved a lot of trees. For our DocuSign implementation, our results. Overall, a larger recruitment pool. We are not limited to the cancer center. We are not limited to the patients that are just seen by our doctors. We're able to really expand our impact. Accruals on an average of 4 times more than we've ever accrued for those studies. And our staff have improved productivity and are able to see more patients, are able to actually conduct research more often instead of make copies and do administrative type tasks. And we're expanding right now to hospital-wide e-consent. So as a result of this DocuSign project that we started, I now have more research projects that I work with, and we're expanding this to include our survivorship studies, which are studies to improve the lives of people with cancer. For example, yoga studies, meditation, exercise studies, low carbohydrate diet studies, things like that, as well as a lot of our prevention and control projects. We've also been approved to use e-consents when we're reconsenting patients to clinical trials. Often with a clinical therapeutic trial, you may have a risk that changes over time. So the patients have to reconsent, and those reconsents, patients may not be coming in every month at this point. They could be on a follow-up schedule where they're coming in every 3 months or every 6 months. But DocuSign gives us a chance to let them know what's changed about the risks of that study and get a signature on a revised consent immediately instead of waiting until they come back to the hospital or instead of FedExing something back and forth. So I'm very excited that all of the things I've talked about so far are our patient-facing consents, but we're starting to use this in some larger scale projects. Our clinical trial regulatory documents is an area that needed a lot of help. And I only found this out when one of our regulatory coordinators left, and I actually had to step into her shoes to fill out some logs, some delegation of authority logs, and I had to route it 3 times to get the doctors to sign it in the right place. The first time, every single doctor signed it in the wrong place. Every single one. After their names were printed, everything, every single one. The next one, I would say 3 out of 5 people signed it in the wrong place. The next time, I walked it over and like put paper around everything else and just left the signature place where they needed to sign. And I said, this is not what we need to be doing. This is a waste of everybody's time. We need to adopt DocuSign. So we're piloting a new regulatory trial document process with Stanford, and it's going to be over the next 4 months, and we're very excited to come back and present the results of this. We're going to be DocuSigning all 1572's delegation of authority logs, safety reports, and other regulatory documents. And we're going to be using the 21 CFR Part 11 compliant module. The other thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating an interface so that when a patient signs on DocuSign, certain data elements will be imported directly into our clinical trials tracking system, which is called Encore. And then Encore will talk to our electronic medical record system to get data back and forth to fully enroll a patient in a trial real time, so we have no issues with misbilling of research patients or other issues that may happen. So we're very excited about both of those projects. And the next person to present is going to be BJ, but I will take any questions. So the question was, do we see differences in adoption by age group? I kind of shortened it. We have really been, I've been thrilled to see that we don't see a difference in age. When we are in the clinic with patients, we are using iPads, which are really intuitive, and patients seem to understand that very well. When we talk to a patient who may be consenting at home, I usually ask them what device or, how savvy are they? And we have, you'll see some data that Dr. Reimel is going to present that, pretty much from 18 to 80, not a problem. Maintaining a paper trail, meaning giving copies of consents to everybody? Or just for your own records, just to be HIPAA compliant and some of the compliance procedures that you have to follow on the clinical side. So we have programmed our DocuSign templates to send a copy of the digital consent directly to medical records. We send a digital copy directly to the patient. We send all of those copies, all of that administration is taken care of. And with the Gilda Radner program, we used to have a letter that we had to send out to all participants to tell them that their email will be Zix encrypted if we're sending any kind of confidential patient information, that kind of thing. We programmed that into the thank you for signing your consent email, where they get the digital copy of their consent. They also get the welcome letter, and this is all about encryption. So it all happens together, which has, again, greatly reduced the administration time.
Hi, I'm BJ Reimel. I'm a gynecologic oncologist, and for the uninitiated, that means I'm a cancer doctor. I take care of women's cancer problems that occur where the bikini would be: the uterus, the ovaries, tubes, cervix, things like that. I'm kind of like the dentist. Nobody really wants to come to see me, but when you're there, it's not so bad. So basically, we did all this great work. We're so excited about the clinical trials that we have. We're so excited about the opportunity to reduce our paper, to improve our patients' experiences, and to reduce the regulatory and administrative burden of our staff so that we can really just do more actual science. But it occurred to me one night, as it's 2 in the morning and my phone blinks on, and I'm like, oh, I'm not on call, what is this? And I open my phone and there's a pop-up notification that says, are you ready to update your iOS? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And then there's this whole page of small text that says, you have to agree to my terms. And as I say, yes, I agree. And I close the phone and I go back to sleep, and the next morning my phone doesn't work. So I was thinking about this, and that we agree to a lot of things digitally that maybe we don't read. And oh my God, what if all these people that I've consented digitally did not read the consent? What if they don't know what they consented for? What if they go home and they think that they were just signing something that doesn't really matter and they didn't mean to give me all of their clinical trial data? Maybe they didn't mean to give me their tissue. What if I'm participating in something that's ethically not so great? Oh my God. And so from this great fear came a research project to determine if we were really getting the same consent comprehension between our digitally consented folks and our paper consented folks. So we wanted to compare whether people really understood the consent that they had signed post a surgery. So we used our biorepository consent process. The biorepository, as Jenny mentioned, is our surgical consent form that allows us to take donated tissue and use it for research. We wanted to look at the rates of consenting between paper and digital. We also wanted to look at who signed in clinic and who signed at home, and then to look at our workflow metrics to make sure that there wasn't anything weird there. So we've initially started with a retrospective design. So for the non-clinical trials people, this means you look backwards in time and look how a process changed over time. It's not the perfect method, but it's pretty good. So in the last 6 months, we consented 173 people to 2 of our major studies, the biorepository study and the Gilder-Radner program. Both of these had both paper and digital options at the time of this retrospective review, so people could consent in either way, but they were not randomized. So 173 people consented. 64 of those participants responded to an anonymous survey sent through RedCap to their email. And this is the breakdown of who responded, which is about 37%. So of the participants who responded, we wanted to ask them, well, do you remember what you signed up for? Most people did, with few exceptions. There's one person who couldn't remember if they'd signed for the biorepository digitally, one person who couldn't remember if they'd signed for the biorepository with paper, and one person who I'm very concerned about couldn't remember if they'd signed anything or how they had signed it. The retrospective study also looked at the age of the participants who responded, and you can see basically there's a pretty decent breakdown. We have people in every group from 18 to 80, 18 to 71 to 80. We don't have anybody over 80, but we don't think there was anybody over 80 in the 173 people that were sent the form. So looking backwards in time, you can kind of see from September to December that the percentage of consents went up, and that really the percentage of paper consents stayed pretty consistent, but the number of digital consents increased over time. So where did people sign? Did they sign at home or did they sign in the clinic? And it turned out that most people signed in person, and with only about a third of people signing at home. So for the people that signed up digitally, did they like it? Did they hate it? We had only one person that said it was somewhat difficult. Everybody thought it was either very easy or somewhat easy. So then we asked them a questionnaire, and this is, for me, where all the money was. Did they understand what they had signed up for? So I'm going to go through the questionnaire with you, since none of you have probably signed up for the biorepository and know what the consent said. Basically, it says, my specimen, tissue, or blood was donated for research, may be used by researchers inside or outside of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And this is either true or false. It turns out that it's true that we have partners with people that are outside of Cedars-Sinai. Number 2 is all researchers utilizing my donated samples will have access to my name and other private information. That's not true. All of our information for the patients that donate is de-identified. And number 3, I can withdraw my consent at any time. An unused specimen will be immediately destroyed. This is true. And then number 4, which is going to turn out to be kind of a big one, so remember this, all data is kept in a database. All efforts will be made to ensure that the data is kept confidential. This is true. So here's what we saw. It turns out that the digital, which is the dark blue, those people seem to really actually have read the consent because they actually responded more appropriately. Now, statistically, this is about the same. This is not a statistically significant difference as far as we can tell. Our final stats are pending, but it's certainly not worse. The paper consenters didn't do dramatically better, and the digital consenters certainly seem to know what's going on. So then the question of question 5, do you know where your copy is? It's kind of like, do you know where your children are? Do you know where your copy is? It turns out that nobody knew a whole lot, but most people had some idea whether it was digital or paper. And then for consent preference, it turned out that most people didn't really care how they signed up. They were just happy to sign, but we did have some people that did prefer online, and a small proportion preferred paper, so we'll probably always have to offer that, despite my desire not to. So while the retrospective study reaffirmed the things that I was really hopeful for, we have to do a prospective study. We have to do a randomized trial, because what if the consent processes are different? What if Jenny consents all the people to digital, and because she's so beautiful, everyone says yes, and they read the consent? And maybe when I do it, I'm consenting on paper, and people are like, are you kidding me? So we really, really have to figure out if this is true. So this is the prospective design, and I don't expect you to know really what it looks like, but basically we randomize people who are going to consent for the biorepository. So they have to be consented for the study, to then be randomized, to then consent. That's basically the whole thing. So when you do a randomized study, it should be fairly well balanced between the two groups, and it's fairly well balanced between the two groups. The age of the participants is just about the same. We only have 16 people so far, and our study's powered for 70 total people. So this is a preliminary look at the data. The prospective questionnaire has more questions, and I pulled a couple of them out for you. So one is the tissue that's donated to the biorepository is used for research purposes. That's true. Blood for research may also be collected during follow-up and clinic appointments on an annual basis. That's true. 3 is tissue that is donated for research would normally is tissue that would normally be discarded. We're not taking the best parts for ourselves. We're just taking the parts that would get thrown away. That's true. Then tissue that is donated to the biorepository may be used by researchers outside Cedars-Sinai. True. 6 is false. Researchers utilizing my donated samples will have access to my name and other private information. This is the same question as we used in the retrospective look. And then number 7, a very critical question. My medical records may be viewed only by the researchers listed on the consent. This is actually true. So even though we partner with other people, the only people that will be able to review the medical records are participants at Cedars-Sinai. So looking at prospectively, it turns out that the digital people did really very well, except for one question, question 7. So why was that? So question 7, just to go backwards to remind everybody, including me, question 7 is about privacy. It's about whether or not medical records may be viewed by people in or out of Cedars. And what we hypothesize, and it's just a hypothesis, is that digital consenters expect less privacy than those who consent on paper, which I think is probably true, at least that's my guess. So looking prospectively what people wished to have, how in the future they wished to consent, only one person wanted to still consent on paper. Most people either said digital or they didn't care. And then whether they reviewed their consent after the office visit, turned out that about 60% of people reviewed it after the office. So what did we learn? We learned that in our study that digital consent participants understood their consent content as well as paper consenters, that we did not appear, based on the data, to harm anybody or convince somebody or not give them sufficient information. And for this, we are extremely, extremely grateful. We were very delighted to see that a lot of participants preferred online consenting, which we sure prefer, and while we'll always have to offer paper as an alternative for people who simply don't want to, it's really nice to see that it can really be the norm and the standard. So if you have any questions, this is our contact information. We're always excited. And I just want to point out that we couldn't do what we do without the people who donate their time to us and their willingness to donate their samples, and that's our patients and the Women's Cancer Program. So thank you. So for digital versus paper consent, to my knowledge, based on my last review of the literature on this topic, which admittedly was probably like November, so I haven't looked in the last couple months, but when I looked then, there was no other published literature on this. So I think for consent, we probably have the scoop on that. There is a lot of data looking at learners and digital versus paper. So like there's a really interesting study that looked at people trying to learn Shakespeare who were reading on an iPad that scrolled up and down versus people who learned the Shakespeare from a book that went this way. And then there's another study that looked at learners with reading comprehension looking at an iPad that had the flip like page thing versus the scroll thing. And so there's a lot of data about that. Will you be publishing this information when you're finished with your study? Oh, yes. You can look us up. We always publish when we're done because that's how we get paid. Not by you, or DocuSign, but by my boss. Yes. I know, I've done this. Hold on. So, it's a great question. We have attestations that are embedded within the consent for specific points that we feel are most important. And that's really where we derived the majority of the questions. So there are specific radio buttons that you click. I am, for research for her, it's I am 18. I am a woman. I understand my data can be kept only a certain amount of confidential, like, life is uncertain, that kind of stuff. But yes, we have specific attestations. And each consent has different attestations depending on what you're consenting for. Anybody else? Yes? Yes, they do, and they love us because it's less paper for everyone. Okay, thank you guys. Yeah, we push back like gently. We push back really gently because I really want these studies. So I usually say, hey, do you know about this thing? We have this DocuSign thing, we'll help you. And sometimes they say, oh yeah, that's really cool. And sometimes they say, no. So often they say, who are you? Like, we have 122 sites and you're the only one that bothers me. Like, that's usually what they say. But someday I'll be important and then I can fix it.
All right, round of applause. And I would also like to say that you can see this in action for the Research for Her site. They always need more people to sign up for it. And you've expanded it, right, to include men? They will include men in the future, but for now, if you're a lady, you can be anywhere and do this because it's DocuSign, and that's incredible. All right, we did Q&A. All right, so just closing out, want to thank our presenters again. Also would encourage you to please give us feedback in the app. Hopefully you're tracking everything there so we can keep getting better every year and tell the presenters how much you love them. And the other thing, if you'd like to share your story and haven't done so yet, there's a little booth area, I think, set up outside the registration area. So encourage you to do that. And then on the topic of if you are a lady, there is actually a women's technology luncheon. The requirement is that you're a woman, so pretty basic. It's up on the 32nd floor of the Westin at Alexandra's, and they're taking walk-ins even if you didn't sign up. So go check that out. We're really excited. It's the first time we're having it and have a really great lineup of female panelists. So thank you all and wish you a great afternoon.